All right. Welcome to my simple LED drum lights thing, drum lotsolator, Luma drumulator, drum stops you trader. So I'm going to shut up now and just show you stuff. So come here. You see this? Hi everyone. You see this? This is a drum trigger. It's on the drum. I got a 1/4 inch cable. You see that? That's plugged into the drum trigger. Bam. Then I have that cable plugged in to this SPD SX in the back in the input for trigger 1 and 2. So before I even talk about any of this stuff, if I hit this drum, I could see the trigger 1 input lights up on the SPD. So thankfully, everything's talking. Great. Now let's move on. Off camera up here, I have a laptop. So this laptop is running a software called Touchdesigner, which you're seeing the screen share of, right? And I'm connecting a USB cable from the SPD into the laptop. It's actually this one over here. And in the SPD settings, if I click menu and I go to setup, I can come down to MIDI and I can make sure that is on and the USB MIDI is on. Setup, right? Options, yes. That's what it is. Then I go down to USB mode, audio MIDI. So make sure that's on. Connect it to the computer. On the computer, you want to make sure you have the drivers for the SPD first. Then you can go download Touchdesigner, crack it open. Before you even do that, you might want to connect the things that we're using to go out to the light. So we have this USB DMX interface that's connected to the computer via USB, and then I have this adapter here, which takes this 5-pin connection and it turns it into a 3-pin connection so that we can run an XLR cable to our light. So that's how everything's connected over here. And in the patch, I am sending the MIDI trigger from the SPD to the DMX controller to turn the light on as it receives a MIDI channel. And it's converting MIDI to DMX. So MIDI is a protocol developed in the 80s. They needed all the electronic instruments to talk to each other. And DMX was a protocol also developed in the 80s where plays touring different venues. They needed a way to get all the lights to talk together without having 10 different ways of doing that. So it's like a universal protocol. Same thing with MIDI. Instead of 10 different protocols, it's just one. So long story short, this is a more complex patch to do that process of taking the MIDI and outputting DMX. We're not going to do it this way yet. Well, let's start with the fundamentals and then we'll work our way there. For Touchdesigner, once you install it, you open it, you're going to have probably the non-commercial version, which has some limitations, but the controls are the same. Everything is the same, more or less. So if I left click on the mouse, I can pan around the scene. If I use the middle wheel, I can zoom in and out. If I right click, it brings up a contextual menu for options on different things. So everything has slightly different options. If I press and hold right click and I drag, I can select a bunch of operators. And for this, I'm just going to delete everything and start from scratch. So one of the things that isn't going to be set up yet is going to be this part. I'm going to clear the log. It's going to look like this. Now, one thing to keep in mind about this software is it is very open-ended. So you have to configure everything manually. The way that we're going to get MIDI into this software is we press the tab key. You may be on this page, right? You can hit tab again, and that'll let you flip through the pages, or you could click on them up here. So I'm on the chop page, and there's a bunch of different operators in here. We don't need to get into that. Let's just go and focus on getting MIDI in. So there's a bunch here. I don't know what to do with that. I'm just going to type MIDI, and hey, look, it's highlighted. Cool. Let's drag it in. Let's go down. Zoom in with that middle mouse. Now you see this triangle? Something is wrong. If we click on it, warning, could not open the MIDI interface. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder why. Maybe it's because we didn't go to the dialogues and click on MIDI device mapper to bring up this window. So the first thing you may notice is it's empty. We're going to click on create a new mapping, and then we're going to select the SPDSX, which is hopefully in this list. So I'm going to clear the log again. If I look at this list, there's two. So I'm not entirely sure why that's the case. I found that this one works for me, and I'm just going to live with that because I've had some trouble getting it recognized before. While we still have this window open, I'm going to hit the drum and we're going to look at the logger window. So down here, we have some information. We're getting the MIDI messages. Awesome. It's in channel 10, note 70. If I move this over, look at that. The MIDI device in is getting channel 10, note 70. Fantominal. So this is a good way to check, make sure everything is connected right. You could also change the channel to 10 because that's what it's coming in on. This could be more useful for, let's say you got 10 MIDI devices running and you want one of these for each one. Who knows? You could get really crazy with this stuff, but let's keep it simple. I'm going to close this window. We're all set on the MIDI. We talked a little bit about DMX. DMX is usually controlled with like a lighting console, and what that looks like is basically like a bunch of faders on a page. And what you do with the software, I'm sorry, with the hardware is each fader gets assigned to a light. If I show you this real quick, I have a little booklet for the light that I purchased. If I go over here, it has a list of all of the DMX channels. Hopefully you could see that. If not, it's not that important. Every light is different. Every light has a different list of channels. The channels could be 3 channels and it's red, green, blue, or 4 channels and it's red, green, blue, white, or 7 channels like this light, and you can control the chases and the strobe effect and all sorts of different things. So we're not using all of those different faders, but just to emulate a lighting board, let's prepare to send DMX out to all 7 channels for this light. So if I press the tab key, now I can type in DMX, and you'll notice there's two. One is a DMX in, one is an out. That's the one we want right here. So I'm going to just place it here, and we have some parameters up here. We also notice this big red X. If we click on it, error, not enough sources specified. On this little map down here, it'll also show us that there's something wrong. The reason we're getting that error, and this is actually a good time to get into the ins and outs of Touchdesigner. And I mean that literally because this side is an input and this side is an output. If I hover over it, it should say, well, at least for the inputs, and sometimes it'll tell you what that input does. In this case, we just need to know that there's ins and outs. If I take the DMX and move it over a little bit, press tab again, now we're going to make our lighting board emulator. So if I type constant, it's going to highlight this one. And if we look at the bottom of this window, it says the constant chop creates new constant value channels. So if I drop that here by clicking twice, the first one lets you hover where you want it to be. The second one actually drops it down. We'll see that it created a new constant chop, and a chop is a channel operator. So that's why we got all these channels. And we can make 7 channels just like that light has. So we press a little plus, it pops out these channels, and now I can make this a little less angry. So if I connect this, bang. Now we see those 7 channels populated in our DMX out. If I come over to this first slider and you pay attention here, when I put it all the way to the right, it says 1, right? Great, that's awesome. It's getting received by the DMX out, but one thing that we need to keep in mind is that DMX protocol uses a value between 0 and 127. What does that mean? It means this is too small for the light to actually recognize it as a signal worth increasing its brightness for. The way we can fix that is if I slide this out a little more, I can right click here and I can say insert operator. What I'm looking for is the math chop. So if I start typing math, it gets highlighted. I can select it and look, it's a little stringy because it's going to be automatically connected to both of them. So what I want to do with this math chop, and you don't need to get too concerned with all this stuff. If you want to learn more, you can click the question mark. That will bring that'll bring you to the documentation for that specific chop, top, whatever it is. Here we're just interested in the range page. I'm going to remap from 0 to 1 to 0 to 127. Once I do that, you'll see that this value changes to 127. If I click on the slider again, notice how it's doing the math for us. If I put it at 0.5, it's taking half of 127, which is 63.5. Now, on this specific light, this is the master brightness, and then the next three are going to be our red, green, and blue channel. So as long as that's up, if I put the second one on, the light's red, diodes just turned on, now the green ones are on, and now the blue ones are on. So on that camera in the corner, you should be able to see the light is on and it's receiving the DMX signal. We've confirmed that we've set it up the right way. So I'm going to put these sliders back down. Actually, I want the light to be full white. So we're going to mix red, green, and blue and get the LED part to show white light. From here, we want to be able to control this brightness slider with the drum, right? How do we do that? We're going to use the MIDI signal, right? The way that we attach this MIDI signal to the constant is by exporting this value. So this is a new thing that we're learning. The way that we do it is we press this, viewer active. Now we click on the thing that we want to affect change to. So that's going to be this constant. And what we want to affect is this master brightness slider. If I click or hover my mouse over this, you notice it shows a different icon, which means it's ready to export this value. If I click and drag, I have this little arrow and I can drop it with this little plus icon that appears under the arrow. Once I do that, I get this little mini list. So I can export the chop, I could chop reference, I could current chop value. Current chop value is 0. This would be useful if you have a bunch of numbers 0.0045021769420. That would be a hard number to copy paste. So that would be useful here. If you have a reference to the chop, I think it's a less active way of sending it. I got to read the documentation more. Listen, I'm not an expert on this. I just learned how to make it do what I want to do, and I hope that you can take something away from that. So I'm just going to click export here, and you'll notice it has this little arrow that's showing us that it's exporting, and it'll actually tell you more information if you hover over it. When I hit the drum, this channel goes up to 1. It is now going to send that value into this little slider. That little slider is getting converted from 0 to 127 because we want the DMX friendly number. And then the DMX out is going to output it to that USB device. So if I zoom out a little bit so we could see this all in action, and then I come over to the drum, voila. Wait a second, it's not working. What? Thankfully, everything's talking. Great.
2 hours later.
All right, everyone, I've tried almost everything. I noticed that if I reset this channel, right, so that it's a fresh start, and I hit the drum, the channel shows up, but it's not affecting the lights the right way. So if I come to dialogues, MIDI device mapper, clear this out, you'll see that it shows in here, and there's another type of place that we can see it in the MIDI event table. So if I zoom in and I hit it, you'll see that it shows up here, and there's a crazy convoluted way we can use this, but I'm not going to get into it. I'm pretty much just going to say the version number you're on may have this bug. 2023.11600. This could be specific to my computer hardware. This could be a result of bad drivers. I've restarted the computer. I've powered everything down, back on. I've rebuilt the file from scratch, and as a matter of fact, let me do that. My new project, right? So tab, chop, MIDI in, dialogues, MIDI device mapper, create a new mapping, SPDSX, close it, not winding anymore. constant right now. That many channels, math. Faster way to do this. Drum now. We have the channel. Reference. Nothing. So I have no idea what's causing this issue. Again, if I just, oh, maybe because those weren't up, but light isn't turning on. Oh, that's right. Now it's on. So if I re-export this, which I can do like that. Yeah, now it's back to the way it was before. So if I hit this, we see that little arrow moves and it shows that it's cooking. If I force cook it. All right, Touchdesigner guys, you gotta fix your thing. Look, it's working fine if I just do this. All right, so that's the end of this video. I don't know what's going on, but hopefully this gets resolved. As you saw before, it was working totally fine. This has happened to me in the past. I've had a lot of problems with the DMX output device. I've had a lot of problems getting MIDI into this window at all because I may have had the wrong MIDI device selected and I may have had the wrong settings on the SPD itself. But long story short, this is what you need in order to convert MIDI into DMX when it's working properly, of course. And in the next video, I'm going to go over how to sort of take this a step up. And maybe you want to connect, instead of having one light, maybe you want to have two lights. Maybe you want to have three lights. This is going to get hard to manage at some point, and there's a way to actually take all this data and make it way easier to work with. So I would recommend tuning into the next tutorial where we talk about pixel mapping, and we'll also attempt to take a MIDI device in that isn't USB. So we'll work with an audio interface. Okay, thanks for watching. Any questions, drop it in the comments. If you have the same bug, please let me know because I would love to figure out that I'm not going crazy here. All right, peace out.
Yeah, we've been codes making drums light up. Yo, MIDI and digital multiplexing fight told me how to go. Touchdesigner, we the kings, nobody can touch us. Gangsta rappers making beats, we got the Midas touch. We pounding the keys, making music that'll blow your mind. With every click and tap, we leave our enemies behind. Ain't no one can touch skills, we the code breakers, making those drums light up. They can't imitate us. We the kings of beats, the masters of the game. MIDI and digital multiplexing fight to is our domain. With Touchdesigner, we create music like no others. Gangsta rappers in the coding world, we true brothers.